are. Okay. Thank you so much. We are so good on time today. So we are starting 11:45 sharp. Hello, everybody. I'm really happy to see the full house here. I'm Jelena Bojović. I'm the director of the Center for Fourth Industrial Revolution in Serbia, and I'm going to be moderating this panel. It is my pleasure to introduce the speakers and panelists that are sitting together with me. And I'm really happy that it is three ladies, three gentlemen, so it's by chance, but I'm really happy that it shows the example of how we need different profiles, different people to fight for the same thing. And I'm also going to share, before I introduce all of my panelists, that we have here professors of mathematics, physics, engineers, medical doctors, molecular biologists, data scientists, so we are a variety of people, and business persons. So we have variety of expertise here that will help us resolve one issue or help us navigate through one issue of importance, and this is how and for what purposes can we use biomedical data, especially genetic data, in different aspects of our life. What is the most common is we understand that we use biomedical data and genomic data for our own health, but let's talk about today what else and how else we can use it, and what are the preconditions in order to be able to do so. So let me introduce my dear colleagues on my panel, Mr. Peter Goodhand, the CEO of GA4GH. GA4GH is a global alliance for genomics and health, and he's also the president of the company. He's also passionate about fighting cancer, so we'll get back to that as well. Ligia Kornowska, managing director of the Polish Hospital Federation and the chairperson of the board of the Data Lake, and she'll explain a bit more later on the Data Lake. She's a medical doctor as well.
Hi, hello.
Miljana Tanić, coming from Serbia, from Institute for Oncology and Radiology of Serbia, a National Cancer Research Center. She's a molecular biologist that got a PhD in Madrid. We have Shadab Khan. Am I saying it right? Okay. Shadab Khan is a healthcare AI researcher. He worked on AI and applied sciences at M42, coming from the Emirates. And last but not least, Ivan Tanasijević, applied mathematics and theoretical physics from the University of Cambridge, and also someone who's heading our Belgrade office of AI Institute. So welcome all. So I already gave a short introduction of all of my panelists, and I'm gonna be jumping to questions. And there is one more person that is not here that we will also listen to, and then I'm gonna tell you a bit later about her as well. So I'm gonna start with Peter, and this is why. When we are talking about data, one of the things that everybody was telling us here, how it is important to share data, but also understand standards of data. Why are these standards important? How and why can we share them? So the GA4GH is an association that deals with helping all of the countries, including Serbia, how to regulate or how to think about standards of data, especially in the area of genomic data. Can you tell us a bit more about it? How you started, why these standards are important, what do they bring?
Sure, and it's a great privilege to be here, and wonderful start to the meeting, so thank you for inviting me. Global Alliance started back in 2012, didn't actually go public until 2013, 2014, and it really was the reduction in the cost of sequencing at the whole genome level. So there were half a dozen elite institutes in the world that pretty much owned the world of whole genome research. They realized that as the cost was dropping from 100,000 to all the way to 1,000 and less, it would become many, many research institutes, many universities, many hospitals doing genomics at scale. and that if they did not help organize the field in advance, then it would be a tsunami of noise, because we wouldn't be able to learn from it, to talk to each other. If we could organize it, we could make it a gold mine, a treasure trove of genomic data. But in order to do that, we'd have to have interoperable standards that would include not only technical standards, but also regulatory and ethics and policy. So from the beginning, it was never about bigger, better genomic research. It was about impacting human health by bringing genomics closer to healthcare. Today, we've got 5 host institutes, including 3 of the originals. So the Broad Institute, the Sanger Institute in the UK, and where I work at the Ontario Institute for Cancer Research in Canada. But we've added EMBL EBI and the Institute of Genomic Medicine at McGill. We're funded through national level funders in those 3 countries. So we would love to have a broader base of staff than just US, UK, and Canada. But they're the countries that are prepared to fund the activity. When we expand it to our volunteers, it's over 400 volunteers from 116 countries working in 8 work streams, developing the standards. There are 40 of them, hundreds, probably thousands of implementations of those standards, protocols, 28 driver projects, people with the real world data. And it's increasingly, in the beginning, it was develop more and more standards to achieve the interoperability. In the last 5 years, it's about make the standards easier to implement in all settings, including low resource. Make the standards work better together in order to create solutions. And thirdly, get closer to healthcare. When you take genomic standards from research and get closer to healthcare, it means you've got to work with other standards groups. So ISO, HL7, HL7 Fire, because healthcare standards are already there. We can't change healthcare, we've got to work with them as we move in. And finally, industry will play an increasingly important role. It's about half our membership, but when we talk about genomics in healthcare, healthcare will buy genomic solutions and platforms, pipelines, whereas researchers tend to build their own. So I think the role of industry in bringing standards into healthcare will be critical.
Can I do just a quick follow-up? Because I know how hard it is in Serbia when we are building the electronic health record. We are also building the register of genomic data. How do you, should I say force, or how do you stimulate people to use standards? What do you do about it? How other countries apply standards, and do they approach you? How it works?
So the incentives to use standards are varied. In some places they say if we try and solve it ourselves within our country, within our region, we'll spend the next 2 years arguing about which standard to use and why. Whereas if there's a global standard, we can all point to it and say, here's a global standard, let's agree to use it. So sometimes the motivation is to stop arguing locally. Sometimes the motivation is a lot of people, it's dangerous to go first with something, to be at the very, very front, but nobody wants to be at the back. So I think sometimes in order to accelerate performance, people can say we need to join this regional, national, global effort because we want to be, just the minister's speech this morning, we want to be leading this, not following it all the way. So how can we be a fast follower? Well, that means joining in and helping create the standards and implement them.
Thank you. I think it's a good segue towards Ligia, because you are leading the network of hospitals in Poland. And of course, the data, when we think about data, they're coming from 2 sources. One source is healthcare and provision of healthcare, and the other one is research that we just talked about. But looking at MDs, medical doctors, and hospitals, I believe it's hard to kind of positively stimulate medical doctors to work on standards, set the data, prepare the data for their own use, but also for the secondary use. How do you do it? Do you have policies? I know that you are investing a lot on this, and any trick?
Thank you for that question. So first of all, I would like to start with underlying the importance of data and data sharing for R&D processes. In 21st century, we have evidence-based medicine, so actually every, not only new technology, but diagnostic and treatment path is based on data, on medical data. And we as a Poland and in Europe in general, I believe, we may be suffering from health data poverty because of the lack of the standards on how to share medical data for R&D, and also when it comes to standardization of this data. So in Poland, part of the medical documentation is standardized, and we have electronic health records. We have ICD-9, ICD-10, the 10, it's procedures and illnesses. We have national system for e-prescriptions, e-referrals. Most of the hospitals conduct or run medical records electronically. Half of them are connected to our national system P1. So we have something when it comes to quality of the data. Of course, we struggle with data that are put like as a medical note of medical doctors. But when it comes to standards of this kind of data, we have to work on that on European level, on international level, because it won't make a huge change if only one part of the Europe will standardize it, and it will be not interoperable with other countries. The biggest challenge, in my opinion, is actually a framework for data sharing, because we as a Poland under European Union have GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, that actually restrict sharing of medical data, of data that is sensitive, especially when it comes to personal data. So when it comes to personal data and genetic data, because it's hard to talk about anonymization of genetic data, which is like a fingerprint of ours, we have to have patients' consent for sharing this kind of data. When it comes to anonymized data, even if they are anonymized, we have in Poland some special regulations about patients' rights that it's not really very easy to share even anonymized medical data from hospitals to the third party for R&D projects. So when it comes to what are we doing about it, we have some projects on the national level when it comes to sharing medical data, when it comes to gathering genetic data about patients. For example, our medical research agency, this is an agency under Ministry of Health, started this program about digital medical centers, and this is a consortium of hospitals, biobanks, and universities that are actually collecting patients' consents for sharing their medical data from medical documentation, but also their genetic data from the biosamples that are collected in biobanks. So this data can be completed, like from hospital, from biobanks, sometimes from university, and it can be used for R&D projects. We are still running that project. It started just a couple of months ago, but this is a great example how to open access to medical data for R&D, but also how to protect patients' rights to privacy, to ask patients for their consent for sharing data.
Thank you. I think you mentioned something that is very important, the use of data in the different aspects of healthcare, but also for the research and vice versa. But this, I think Milena can maybe help us a bit more understanding both sides, I would say. On one hand, coming from the Institute for Oncology and Radiology of Serbia, you do have a lot of samples and a lot of genetic data related to cancer and treating cancer, but in the same time, you are a researcher, so you know how to collect data and what you do with them when we are talking about research. And we did a small survey saying that unfortunately, sick people donate their data very easily. Healthy ones don't. So let's talk a bit more about that. How important is the data, both from people that do have already illness or the healthy ones in all of these aspects for personal treatment medicine. It's not only about me, it's about the humanity and how we can help development of personalized medicine.
Yeah, so at the Institute of Oncology and Radiology of Serbia, we are kind of a dual institution, so we do both clinical diagnostics using genomics for the past almost 15 years. And we are generating a lot of genomics data that is consented to be used for research purposes as well. So this is very important aspect, so that every patient that comes into hospital signs an informed consent, both for the material itself and the data that can be reused in a obviously properly ethically approved studies. So the data is there, and like you said, patients are very willing to take part also in research that we are doing. So some of the things that we are also focused on is making kind of investigator-led observational trials mostly that are focused on finding different biomarkers, finding different ways how to maybe detect some of the diseases better. So we are focused a lot on prevention and on follow-up care as well, using this data. But one thing that comes to mind is that the ownership of the data and the samples itself is not highly regulated. It's not regulated in Serbia. It's not regulated worldwide at all. So the data, according to GDRP, which is Serbia is compliant completely with the EU GDRP, the data itself is personal. It is a special kind of data, genetic data, but the source of the data, the biosample, is not regulated. So there is a big distinction how it is regulated in the US, where it is considered to be a property of the hospital, versus Europe and Serbia as well, where it is in the gray zone. So hospitals are kind of guardians of both the sample and the data. But the patient does not have the authority to ask for the sample, to give it away to someone else or to a specific hospital or donate it anywhere else, or the data. The only authority the patient has is to revoke the consent to use this data in research purposes going forward. So everything that was done stays in the public sphere, but it cannot be retracted. And there was a recent case that I like to highlight in US that can have relevance here is all of the data for the healthy people. So genetic data in 23andMe. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's quite a big US company that is doing healthy people ancestry and health and traits kind of testing, and people are donating their samples for research as well and data as well. But with the shadow of bankruptcy, it is a really big question, what happens to that data? And that is a huge data lake, basically, that is outside of HIPAA in US, because it is not for medical use. So there are many, many aspects that we need to really think about. But going back to the clinics, I think we're trying to follow all the standards, how the data should be structured and processed, so that when we are doing research studies along with partners from Europe, that we can put in place joint control agreements, material transfer agreements. So everything has to be put in paper, who will have access to the data, how they will be used, for what purpose they will be used.
Okay, thank you. I think it's interesting example that you gave with 23andMe. I think a lot of people are donating their data or giving their samples and then their data in order to get who's my ancestor, you know, am I Italian or French? But they're not that willing giving data, you know, for the purpose of the research, but this is just a thought. But when we are there, Mr. Khan, I just wanted to ask you a question that our conference is AI for Life, Biotech Future Forms. So we are thinking and wanting to understand better, and everybody's asking me whenever I go outside, like how we can use AI in healthcare. What kind of data do we need in order to develop AI algorithms? What these algorithms are going to be used for? Can it hurt me? So the question to you is, what kind of data, genetics data, biomedical data, which samples, how big samples need to be, all of these questions that pop out, and how is it going to be used for us, how we can use AI for our health.
So I think I come from the United Arab Emirates, and it's a country where we are running one of the world's largest genomic biobank program called the Emirati Genome Program, with a recorded 700,000 whole genome sequences and counting as of today. They also have set up a health information exchange called Malafi, which aggregates records for over 8 million patients, with roughly 500 million visit records and many other associated electronic medical records from the practice. Malafi system is also beginning to accumulate medical images. So they pull in chest X-rays, MRI, CTs, ultrasounds from more than 1,000 small clinics and hospitals in Abu Dhabi. But they also have a wastewater surveillance system which pulls in population level data, right, looking at the kind of environmental toxins and other analytes present in the wastewater data. And if you just zoom out and think about it, there are data sets from molecular scale to population scale that really span different time scales as well. Genomics gives you a singular snapshot that's non-dynamic, but electronic health records are dynamic, and so on. And to answer your question, you really need all of these complementary modalities to really put together the fullest picture that you can about not just an individual's health, but the population health, as well as the environmental effects on these health systems, right? To be able to analyze and then forecast the possible risks that an individual faces. AI has applications in analyzing all of these different modalities, and we ourselves have built foundation models for pretty much all of these modalities, including electronic health records, to do the sort of what-if experiments, right? Counterfactual experiments. What would happen if I were to switch this patient from drug A to drug B, for instance? But we've also built AI models to analyze the genomic data sets, right? Particularly to see if we can identify novel regulatory elements in the genomes. We've also built AI models to be able to reduce the workload for radiologists and so on and so forth, right? But something really interesting happens if you start thinking about what are the possibilities if we could train models that are able to analyze all of these multimodal information. And I'll give one specific example of that. It's known that in most health systems across the world, roughly half of the chronic kidney disease patients had very poor control over their diabetes before they experienced kidney failure. Now, we know that these patients often visit every 3-4 months a facility where their blood markers are recorded. Perhaps they go for an annual eye screen, a retinopathy scan, among others. And if you look at today, the standard is analyzing the electronic health records to come with a risk stratification to figure out who's at an elevated risk of kidney failure. But you really know that there's an opportunity to exploit genomic data in addition to imaging data, right? We know that retinopathy is increasingly a scan where researchers are turning to find biomarkers for, among other things, including neurological disorders, right? So if you had methods to combine complementary information coming from all three modalities, you could perhaps achieve a better risk stratification to forecast who's at an elevated risk of a kidney failure, and then to be able to match these patients with a prevention program. In the UAE, that's roughly a $75,000 per person per year expense. And I'm sure it's not cheaper in most developed or high-income countries across the world. So really, there's opportunity all across the board, all modalities, but I think the greatest opportunity is in building AIs that can analyze all of these modalities together.
Thank you. So we kind of heard that we are talking about using data in research purposes, in a variety of fields. We understand that data can and should be used for diagnostics. Combining different type of data can help us in developing AIs that can actually help in radiology, as you mentioned. But I was insisting kind of to bring someone who's working on the development of drugs using AI. So this is why Ivan is here. And I'm really happy to say that this morning I was giving an interview on RTS, and I was talking about what Serbia does and so on. And people were telling me, oh, they were SMSing me saying, it's far from us, it's not a reality, it's, you know, but I'm saying, okay, I'm going to bring Ivan and say, here in Serbia, this is what we do on our AI Institute. And Ivan, can you please share a bit on the projects that are actually AI related and dealing with drug development?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. It really gives me the opportunity to brag about the Institute and everything we do. So the Institute was founded just over 3 years ago, and once we reached a critical mass of people interested in working on healthcare-related projects, we got our own group, and yeah, we're working on plenty of projects, not just healthcare, but also life sciences, as Jelena mentioned, on drug discovery and so on. And before I just get to bragging and listing the projects, I just want to mention that a lot of it was actually made possible only because of a timely digitalization and attempts at centralizing the data. And before I get into the drug development that I personally work on the most, I just want to mention a couple of projects that doesn't relate to drug development per se. So we worked on developing a tool to help radiologists interpret mammography images, something that's already been put to use. And it should be mentioned that a big chunk of it was trained on publicly available data, which is something that, you know, should be insisted upon, that a lot of the data should be publicly available for research, just because of the vast amounts of data that AI actually needs to make sense of just about anything. We had a project on rare disease detection, in particular Fabry disease, that is essentially like a nationwide screening for a rare disease which has really difficult to detect symptoms. And what we're doing is we're literally just reading the textual medical records, and from that we're able to, you know, give a prediction of if a certain patient has this sort of a rare disease. And now onto the drug development projects that I personally work on. It's basically standing on the shoulders of people that you've probably heard just received a Nobel Prize in chemistry, David Baker and the AlphaFold crew. It was made available by these tools that ingested vast amounts of structural molecular biology sort of data, crystallized proteins and so on. So the two projects that we work on that are related to drug development are peptide design, where we're literally using and adapting these sort of tools to design peptides that with a specific kind of drug delivery method could, you know, basically become really potent therapeutics. And the other project that we're working on with a Japanese startup is developing an overall AI framework for small molecule drug development, which again really benefits from a lot of, you know, proprietary data, unfortunately. But yeah, those are the projects. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that you mentioned is actually helping me introduce the video that we were gonna see. We're talking about the Fabry disease, one of the rare diseases, and I guess majority of people do know about the disease, but the disease actually is about multi-organ failure. And it's very hard to diagnose. So people are dying at the age of 45 because of the multi-organ failure, and there is a cure that can help them. It's just the lack of enzyme that you do not have. And I believe that these type of activities and algorithms and tools, I know that maybe there are 15 or maybe 200 people in Serbia that could be diagnosed with this disease. Maybe not for someone, it's not too much, but for that person, it's a lot. So I think this is a good segue towards the video. So I would just like to ask you just to listen to the short video of 2 minutes.
I am Bojana Mirosavljević, an embryologist from Serbia. As an embryologist, my passion is preimplantation genetic testing, and I will explain you why. I lost my daughter Zoya from very rare neurodegenerative Batten disease in 2013. In her honor, since 2015, Zoya's Law has existed in Serbia, which enables the diagnosis of rare diseases and genetic anomalies. It has saved more than 4,000 families until today. Zoya's Law includes pre-implantation genetic testing. I presented Zoya's Law in the European Parliament in Brussels and in the United Nations in New York, as well as over 150 international congresses. Because of PGT, I survived, and I had 2 healthy girls who are not even carriers of the Batten gene. PGT saves lives, and my goal is to improve PGT in Serbia and region. PGT contributes significantly to maternal and newborn health by reducing genetic risks, improving pregnancy outcomes, and addressing ethical dilemmas associated with prenatal diagnostic procedures. Pre-implantation genetic testing plays a crucial role in preventing the transmission of genetic disorder by selecting healthy embryos during IVF. It offers hope to families at risk of passing on rare diseases, allowing them to have healthy children. PGT is a powerful tool to prevent the transmission of rare genetic inherited disease. PGT examines embryos during in vitro fertilization before possible transfer to a woman's uterus for a range of genetic problems that can cause implantation failure, miscarriage, and birth defects. By creating PGT Center, we aim to bridge the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical skills, and Pre-Implantation Genetic Center equips embryologists with specialized knowledge, practical skills, and ethical awareness. By training embryologists, PGT will be more accessible to patients. Special benefit is that PGT analysis is financed by government health insurance fund in Serbia, and is therefore more accessible to the patients. There are not enough trained embryologists who can perform PGT. The establishment of a PGT Center for the education of embryologists will improve the access of patients to this method, all with the goal of increasing the chance of obtaining healthy offspring. PGT Center offers comprehensive training that covers not only technical aspects but also ethical consideration, patient communication, and counseling skill. By combining scientific advancements, patient advocacy, and collaborative efforts, our organization can make lasting impact on the lives of rare disease patients, but also help couples who have a problem with conception to have a healthy offspring.
Thank you. I just wanted to again stress the importance of data sharing, genetic testing, genomic data to save and also diagnose early, identify potential illness that our offsprings might have, and so on. Maybe this is a sad story. Maybe I shouldn't start. Maybe I wasn't supposed to put it here. But it actually brings me to the second round of questions that I wanted to ask. And this is, I wanted for all of my panelists to talk about how what they do influence patients, how we can, with what exactly you do. I want to hear examples of the things that you did through your life and through the work you do to save people. So, and I wanted, I'm now going to ask you, I have to kind of be a bit shorter than we were supposed to have. So can you please, I wanted, one important thing for us is Australia and how they do a screening program in Australia. So if you can also mention that, because one of the things that we want for Serbia to start is DNA screening program. So if you can mention that as well, please, Peter.
Sure. So GFGH itself does not do research or deal with patients. So we have these 28 driver projects, and then from those, they are the ones with including Australian Genomics, Genomics England, and probably another 5 or 6 communities. So we take the driver projects, and they fall into rare disease or cancer or national precision health initiatives or clinical labs. And we say to them that you're inside the GFGH helping us develop the standards, but you've got others in the world who are in the same, trying to do the same work in the same way. Can you reach out and build a community? One of those communities is National Initiatives Forums. There's probably over 20, probably 25 countries around the world who are doing precision health in their country. Often starts with a healthy cohort program and a reference genome, a Slavic genome, not a North European genome or a African genome. So a cohort, a reference genome, rare disease projects, cancer, and increasingly there'll be polygenic risk scores that are related back to reference genome. So all of those real-world national initiatives in countries, some are doing PGT. Australia's got, and I forget the name of the project, but They did what Australian Genomics did was different from Genomics England. They did not do a big 100,000 genome study to start. They're a federated country, so healthcare is delivered in 5 states and then their territories. So what they really did is prepare the whole country for the advent and the introduction of genomic medicine using flagship projects to prove the value, the economic value, the societal value, educate the workforce. One of those was on screening. The UK has just announced 100,000 newborn screening. So coming at it not from a prenatal point of view, but from newborn, and by screening everybody using genetics, will we find diseases at the beginning of a child's life, not 45 years old or 25 years old, when it's much more difficult to treat. So I would say that for Serbia, joining in national initiatives, working with things like GDI and Beyond 1 Million Genomes, Genome of Europe, and building things here that will benefit Serbian patients, but learning from things like Australian Genomics and Genomics England, are absolutely the way to go. We're seeing great, rapid evolution of precision health in places like Singapore and Qatar, where they were 5-10 years behind the UK. They've just learned from everything that the UK did wrong and picked up the things that work well. It is much, much easier to bring real patient benefit in a single payer system. So in Canada, where I am, healthcare is delivered in 14 provinces, the provinces and then the territories. So 14 health systems across Canada. Each one's got responsibility for healthcare, but we can do the research and the best practices nationally, but the implementation's got to be in each place, exactly the same as Australia. So I think on a personal level, the whole reason I'm doing this is my first wife died of a rare disease, a cancer, but she outlived her 2 oncologists, and those 2 individuals had about 90% of the world's knowledge of non-functioning islet cell carcinomas 30 years ago, and that knowledge died with them if you didn't read the paper that they'd written. So that gave me a fundamental commitment that knowledge as it's generated should be put in places where it can be shared, it can be accessed, it can be built on. It shouldn't be buried in just the Mayo Clinic. So that's why I do it.
Thank you. Ligia, we mentioned that you are on the board of directors or president of the board of directors of something called the Data Lake Foundation. Can you give us a bit more on why you are doing it and what is it?
Sure. So as a team from Polish Hospital Federation and AI and Innovations in Health Coalition, we tried and struggled to open the access to medical data, to make the knowledge shareable, actually. We actually were inspired by one of the European regulation, Data Governance Act, that is a regulation about how every citizen can share their data, not only medical data, for R&D purposes. And we even have this phrase like citizen scientists. So every patient, every citizen can be a part of medicine development. So we started this project, Data Lake and Donate Your Data Foundation, to implement the phrase in Poland about donating their data, the same they do as when it comes to blood donation or organ donation. Maybe it's not the relevant example, but as a blood donation. So we started the whole media campaign with one of the biggest media for patients in Poland, Medonet, and educate people that they can donate their data for the science. They can be they can be a part of data altruism, and they can impact medicine development. And we actually did some kind of projects, like number of projects for now, because it was going on for 2-3 years now. For example, I am really glad that I heard this video about Fabry disease, because we also developed the rare disease patients registry. It's a disease ASMD. This is an ultra-rare disease. And we approach patients to share their consents for sharing their medical data, collect medical data from very different data points, like hospitals, like biobanks, like universities, like primary care entities. And then after collecting this data, even if they are this is unstructured data, we structure them with the structure that is agreed on with our scientific council for that particular rare disease. And then we use this data for very different purposes, like for writing like medical research papers, or when it comes to this patient's registry, we want to develop AI solution to help diagnose these patients quicker, because for now, like, the estimate for diagnosis for this illness in Poland is like 6 years. So for 6 years, patients don't know what is going on with them. They are going from the one medical specialist to another medical specialist. Another example of our projects is actually the report on diagnostic and treatment path for patients with breast cancer. And both of these projects were supported by top 10 pharma companies like Sanofi or Novartis. So it shows that we can base our work when it comes to R&D on patients' consents. We can respect their rights to privacy and teach all of us that sharing data is very, very important for medicine development. But to do that, we of course needed to have IT infrastructure for collecting these consents, because like collecting it on papers and giving a patient the option to withdraw this consent, of course, because they have to have a power to withdraw this consent on paper, would be actually impossible. So we developed the whole IT infrastructure, the patient's account, the electronic signatures that allows patients to give this kind of consents and withdraw this kind of consents, and actually check how their data is processed digitally. So I think it was a crucial point in these projects.
I think it's one of the key questions that is popping out in that sense. How me, as the owner of my data, are going to know if someone is using data? I believe that's important for people, and if they would understand how this data is used, they would, I hope, be more willing to share it, especially if it's used in an anonymized way. But I also wanted to talk to Miljana and ask her about Institute for Oncology and Radiology and your work. What kind of, in which areas of healthcare do you believe we can most benefit from data-driven research? Can you give some examples from your work?
Yes, so I'd just like to highlight, perhaps people don't know that Serbia is not really lagging behind any other countries of using genomic data for clinics, basically. So we do have, for the past 10 years, hereditary disease program for breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and colorectal hereditary cancer, which are also rare diseases. Cancer itself is not rare, but the hereditary one is. And we are also using genomics for companion diagnostics. So for all the biological therapies that patients are being prescribed, the initial step is to analyze that sample, whether there is some kind of genetic vulnerability. For ovarian cancer, we are doing BRCA testing for PARP inhibitors. We started off for breast cancer as well. And we also have ongoing collaborations with private sector pharmaceutical companies that are doing pilot assays for testing of novel indications to expand the number of patients that can benefit from these from these therapies. And I think the biggest progress can be made, but we are not there yet, is the applications of personalized oncology in kind of comprehensive genome profiling. So that N of 1, you have a patient and you can test for every actionable mutation inside of that tumor and select the therapy that is approved for that particular mutation, perhaps in some other cancer type. But for this to be implemented, all of these procedures are, firstly, they're very costly, they're highly complex. So to do one of these kind of tests, it takes a month. You need to have enough patients to put them. You need to have enough personnel that is skilled to analyze these kind of data. You need supportive IT infrastructure to kind of store and process big data. Genomics is not just small numbers. And finally, you need a healthcare system. Luckily, we have a universal healthcare system, which is a good thing, but enough funding in the healthcare system to support all of these drugs, because it would be completely unethical to tell a patient, okay, I can find that your tumor has a specific mutations and there is an approved drug for that mutation, but it costs like 20,000 euros a month and you cannot get it. So that's a catch-22 at the moment, and this is something where we really need to work.
Thank you. I just wanted one follow-up question, a quick one, because we are lacking time. Biobanks. You mentioned the importance of building the biobanks, and your institution is actually working on a project.
Yes, thanks for that. So we are developing a first kind of standardized biobank. So usually the research is done, people are just collecting samples and they're being stowed away in some freezers for 20 years after the study is finished, and this is not why patients are donating the samples. We want them to be used and reused and extract as much more information and generate knowledge from them for the benefit of future patients. And this is why we set up through a multinational European-funded consortium that is led here by Dr. Milena Čavić to set up a real research biobank and try to get it also approved and standardized. So all of these samples can be collected in an organized way. We can have the metadata on them, and we can have the information how they were processed, so that if a researcher wants to use them in the future, they can know if that sample is suitable for the type of analysis they want to do.
I think that one is extremely important, the biobanking in Serbia, but also the legislation, the rule how we are gonna work with these samples, what's going on, like for the secondary use, who owns it. And I think it's a question for the next time, but we need to talk about that as well, because currently in Serbia we're doing several projects in this area, and it's always an issue about samples and how we get them. So Mr. Khan, we now talk about genetic data, biomedical data. Let me just give you the example of Serbia. We have 11 institutes that are doing genomic sequencing in Serbia. All of these databases are now within these institutes, so they're not centralized. Also, we do not combine this data with the healthcare data. So what I wanted to ask is, like, what is in your experience, you are developing different AI tools, like combination of genomic data and the medical data. What else data do you need in order to get the best results in the development of tools, and what you are currently working on?
Sure. So, as I previously mentioned in my response to the last questions, the data sets really exist at a different time scale, different spatial scale, and so on. And you really need as much of it as you can put together. That's one side of it. The other side of it is that the data sets need to be high quality, right? And this becomes particularly challenging when you start looking at electronic health records and claims, right? EHR, so in our experience, what we've seen is that in the health system of UAE, there are 55 different standards for storing medications. There are 79 different standards for vocabularies for storing prescriptions, lab tests, right? And then for diseases, they have ICD-9 and ICD-10. So it's a really heterogeneous data set. There's no one way of identifying a diabetic patient by simply looking at the disease codes. You really have to go and look at the medication codes and lab results. And that presents quite a lot of challenges because these records are also influenced by what insurers pay for. So for instance, someone might have a disease code for one of the cardiovascular diseases, right? But perhaps it was placed there only so that the insurer would actually pay for lipid profiling of that patient, right? Now, unless you actually work on standardizing the data set to one common standard through which you can then run your analysis, you'll provably end up with a biased result, right?
But can we use AI to help us standardize the data? Can we do, different approach instead of, kind of asking MDs, let's have standards and let's put all of these data in standards. Can we do vice versa, develop tools that can help us standardize
and
the
that's
data?
partly what we did, right? So we built up AI models using particularly natural language processing models that come up with recommendation on what a particular code might mean. And then when the model was not highly confident, such recommendations were reviewed by individuals with medical expertise. And that's the only way you can go about cleaning up such large-scale heterogeneous data sets, right? But the other part of it that I wanted to comment on are the standards are one thing. You also need incentives and policies to make sure that the data going in is right, because you can have a highly standard, completely useless data set, right? As we've seen oftentimes in the cases of claims. And so you have to have the incentives for the hospital staff to actually take their time to document well, right? Copy pasting from previous visit records is a very common problem that we've seen across many different health systems. And you have to have the right policies so you don't see the kind of issues that I described, whereby a code exists simply because the hospital is in a battle with insurer to make sure that their patients can receive the tests and the care that they need. It's really a combination of all of these things that leads you to a high quality data set. And lastly, centralization is one way of going about analyzing and building these data sets. The technologies that we've built have a federated design, and that allows you to not only query what kind of data set is out there across, say, the 11 institutions that you mentioned, but also then to be able to analyze and build models without these data sets ever leading the host institutions. And that's partly designed to make sure that we're compliant with the national regulations in the countries where we operate, and also that we're able to preserve the privacy of the patients whose data sets we are analyzing.
Thank you. The question, why I posed this question was because we do have the data that is like 15 years old, so when we are talking about standards, we are looking at the future, but, it's a waste that we have a data that is there already, but I hope you're going to solve that. Ivane, you are here in Serbia working with the data in Serbia, so as a conclusion, any advice on what kind of data you need, what kind of standards do you need? Do you need standards, or can you make an AI tool that can help us? So any conclusion on that?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. Yeah, as Dr. Khan said, we want all the data that we can get. Always, so yeah, as a ML engineer, data scientist, whatever, we always want more data. Multiomics data is wonderful in drug development for identifying biological targets, entities that are actually druggable, that are causing the disease in a way. So that's one side, and all the structured multiomics data, genomics, proteomics, metabolomics, everything that we can get is playing a major role in drug development. But one thing that I want to highlight is on the other side of the things, where people, when they develop a drug, or even both in academia and in pharmaceutical industry, we are sort of conditioned to always publish the good data. So the successful cases, and a lot of the essays published are of the confirmatory nature, where you only get, for example, 60 molecules tested and 58 of them work. For AI to get good at predictive some sort of biological activity of a molecule, you actually need a range of molecules so that it can understand all the relationship between different structures in the molecules that are causing the activity. So yeah, it's essentially my advice, or what we need to get better at AI and drug development is getting more of screenings out there with a lot of negative examples of molecules that simply don't work, don't do the desired thing, but have been tested.
I think you kind of completely agree with Mr. Georgiankopoulos, because he said, like, we need a lot of failures in order to gain success. So we need failures in order to reach innovation. So please, if you have any questions, I would be happy to give the mic. We have here, please, can we share the mic, or I can give mine, or one of these? I can give.
Great. Hi, I'm Nenad Petkovic. I'm from Amazon Web Services, based out of London. What I hear, a kind of common topic is cloud and storage, right? So question for Peter, probably you suspected that. So how did the cloud kind of helped with genomics and genomics research? Because for example, I worked on newborns project with Genomics England. So it's just very exciting to hear that. And second question, which recommendations would you give to the governments in how to use public cloud, whether that would be AWS or Azure or some third provider?
Even GCP.
Even GCP.
So when we first started, we wrote a white paper in 2013. We were struggling to find any examples of genomics in the cloud. I think we found 3 or 4. NIH in the US actually forbade any of its research data to be in the cloud. Today, it's almost people design with a cloud-first solution. We've seen examples, back to Australia again, where they thought, we'll put the research data in a public cloud, AWS, but we'll keep all the clinical data on-prem in the hospital. When they did the security analysis, they realized that the public cloud had got more security built into it than the hospital system. But the concept of who's controlling it, where is the cloud, so we'll see countries or jurisdictions, they want the cloud to be permanently anchored above their physical boundaries. There's a huge comfort level with it, and I think we have one of our work streams is entirely focused on developing cloud solutions, so workflow execution tasks, DRS, the data repository service. It's becoming a huge enabler. And the other things that are happening in big cloud-based genomic data sharing is we've shifted from data download, bring the data to me and work on my thing, to data visiting. You go to the data, you create a trusted research environment, and you go to that and you behave according to their rules, and the cloud environment sets the rules, whether it's a private or a public. And then the last thing is this concept of federation. If I got a really important project, why would I go to each one of those 11 cloud repositories or individually, as opposed to be able to launch a query that discovers that 7 of the 11 have the data I want, and then start analyzing it using standard methods. So I think that the whole of genomics has shifted to a cloud-based solution. Your company and the others have played a huge role in helping us develop standards. And I think the concept of data stewardship, people using the data wisely and making it available to many, is the way genomic data sharing is going. And AI has got this huge, huge role, but primarily on the messy, noisy health data, which is where which we need to combine with the genomic data. So, there you go.
Thank you. I'm now stealing the mic from my panelists. So I think we had a few more questions. Can you bring it over there and then in the back? So first over there, please.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, okay, this is loud.
I'm going to get to you then.
I'm Mariana. I'm a molecular biologist, and I have question for specifically Mr. Ivan, but it's connected to the story of Dr. Milana. Well, you already use pharmacogenetics in developing new drugs. So would it be possible to use that data vice versa? So to deduce So, as she said, in the development of personal medicine, so if you already target biomarkers on genome to make a drug, can that data be shared with national institutes, hospitals, so that they can use it to find, so basically to include it in the pipeline to find a better drug?
Yeah, great question. Yes, people are working on that at the moment. I don't know of any successful results on that yet, but yeah, you know, essentially with this sort of trained AI, you can put in a known drug and, you know, genomic data, specific genomic data to that patient, and get an adaptation of the drug that works better. So whether it's because a protein got a slightly different structure or something more high level than that, as long as we have a lot of this data on how treatments are affecting patients and, you know, related to their genetic markup, we can work on these things. But as of right now, I don't know of any solutions that are already implemented, and it's a great idea.
Okay, thank you.
Can I clarify? Just one point. I think I want to highlight the role that machine learning AI have in the whole drug discovery pipeline. So the first part where you are discovering the potential vulnerabilities, cellular vulnerabilities, genetic vulnerabilities, this is the place where AI can help a lot as a useful tool, and in the discovery of small molecules, like he was saying. But the other part of the pipeline, which is clinical demonstration of safety, utility, efficacy, and everything else, that is unfortunately the biggest bottleneck, and this is the place where we really need to become. We've shown with the COVID we can do it. When there's a will, there is a way. So with enough funding to do these kind of things, these processes can be shortened, but that is the biggest bottleneck.
Thank you. Some ideas are popping now. Please.
Yes, thank you. Milena Čavić from the Institute for Oncology and Radiology of Serbia. Thank you for a great panel. Dr. Goodhand, thank you for your crucial, beautiful insights. I have a short question for Dr. Khan. So we've touched upon the data ownership and who is the owner of the data. So what about AI-derived data? This will be something that's a level up, right? So how will we solve that? Is it the company who produces the data? Is it the patient? Is it the hospital that provided them? We have 3 levels of complications, I think. And for Dr. Tanasiewicz, have you tried working with synthetic patients, maybe? Some projects with that, and will it further complicate things? What do you think, or will it ease the way of screening and breakthrough?
Okay. So, yeah, thank you for asking that question. I think there are, when we think about issues surrounding who owns the data and what happens when AI produces some data, right? There's usually a bioethical perspective to it, and the second one is legal. And oftentimes, the legal perspective could be local to the country that we're operating in, but there could be international laws that apply as well. For instance, even in the UAE, if we are storing and processing any European national data, that would be under the purview of the GDPR regulation. So that comes with its own specific requirements on how that data can be stored, processed, and analyzed, right? When it comes to AI-derived data, I'm not sure if I have an exact answer on who owns that. In some cases, you could build AI models that are capable of reproducing individual data points with a very high fidelity. And we've seen that the model developers in such cases have been sued by the individuals whose data sets were compromised. There are privacy-preserving mechanisms such as differential privacy and others to go about it. But oftentimes, there comes an accuracy and fidelity trade-off that you then have to deal with, right? Personally, I'm not a believer in synthetic data for electronic health records. These are extremely high-dimensional data sets, and the kind of sample size requirements they impose on being able to model particularly less frequently present disease codes and other such properties in the data, we simply don't have that data at that scale. We're talking about 10,000 variations of diseases, and again, thousands of variations of lab tests and medication records and free text notes and so on. Yeah, I think that answers the first part of your question. The second one is for...
Should we include it in the ICF in the future discussion about AI? Ownership of, because it's a completely different set of data, right? And the patient has the right to know.
Right. Perhaps. Yeah.
Honestly, just to piggyback on that, I would keep synthetic data always separate. For numerous reasons, but for one, it's always good to keep track of it. So I just need a bit of clarification from your question. Do you mean synthetic patient? I'm not familiar with the term. Is that like a digital twin of, or, yeah?
Yeah, it's a completely new technology tool that we will be using, practically mimicking what's going on in the real world, but not using real patients. As it's something we've heard about this year. I don't know how much familiar you are with it.
So I've heard of companies that do that. Not a lot about it in the academia. It's simply a really complex network and a really sensitive one. So we are going towards it, but then again, there isn't a lot of data about each specific interactions, protein-protein interaction networks and so on. People are working on that, and there are huge breakthroughs every year. And I know I'm here to tell you that it's not sci-fi, but some of these things are maybe a year away or so on.
Yes, Serbia wants to be a leader, right? So
absolutely, yeah. But I think worldwide, the whole concept is, maybe a year away.
So it's actually not a sci-fi, because in the United States there is a company, American company, that conduct clinical research with a control group that consists of digital patients that are like digital twins of the patients that actually get a drug. So it's not a sci-fi, it's already going on. In such cases, of course, these patients have to give consents, but if we are talking about synthetic data that are created based on anonymized data, if you use anonymized data, you don't need patients' consent for doing that.
Very interesting question. I asked that question to Mr. Yankopoulos, and he told me the digital people cannot change the real people. So I think his answer is let's stick with the real people. But who knows? We had only one more question. I'm sorry, we have over here one question, and then we are going to finish. I'm sorry, we are late already. So please, one more.
Hello, my name is Nada Milovic. I finished law here. So just a comment, because I see that in all of this discussion, I think that lawyers should be included, because a lot of questions people want to know, their protection of their data. So it's my advice next time to
bring one lawyer here.
Because people have questions. And regarding AI, still they cannot be holders of any information like owners. So it is the institution who holds the
data,
ownership, yes, of the data still. Okay, that's all. So include lawyers.
Okay, maybe we can discuss this a bit more. I'm really passionate about legislation, but
just a second. A law on data protection. You have now PhD on law university, so you have people who are skilled to respond and are professors also.
Okay, thank you so much. I think we want to conclude this. I want a big applause for my panelists. Thank you, everybody. And thank you all for being patient. I noticed only one person leaving, so this is good. Thank you so much.